This podcast is rated E for explicit and by category of true crime contains language and descriptions of crimes not suitable for young or sensitive listeners. Marcie Fuller Swinford deserves justice, as do many missing and murdered victims. Surely, in a free society, adults have the right to be missing, to run away, or start over. But where does that right end as the families and loved ones fear for their well-being? That is why many states have adopted laws forcing local law enforcement to investigate adult missing persons cases, so the critical time and evidence isn't lost in the delay. But still, some cases seem to get priority over others. What makes one life worth more than another? This is part 4 of Marcie Fuller Swinford, Appraisal, and this is the Cold Case Chronicles.
I know your secret. I know the truth. I know your secrets, and I'm telling on you.
There's a few more things I want to talk about Marcie's case before we wrap it up, even though we pretty much covered everything on it, wrapping it up last week. We talked about how odd it was that she didn't wear shoes.
Yeah.
That her shoes were just kind of laying there in the car whenever it was found. One of her relatives contacted me and told me that it was normal for her to not wear shoes when she would drive. So she was one of those people that...
That's what I was saying, like, those jelly shoes would hurt.
Right.
And I would get, like,
blisters.
Taking them off.
Yes, you would get blisters on them.
Oh, yeah.
She did that all the time. She
said, when you get out of the car, you put them back on.
Right.
And would they really be neatly placed on the console?
Yeah, probably. Maybe if you took them off to drive. I could see that someone may have done that. But like you say, that doesn't explain why they were still there and she was not with her car any longer. Why wouldn't she put her shoes on to get out of the car and go somewhere if she went voluntarily?
Right.
There has to be some reason that they were still there. So she obviously didn't leave the car voluntarily. I also have a few more tallies in the handyman for suspect category. We've heard from a lot of his exes this past couple of weeks and talked to them, and they've reported that he has stalked them repeatedly, not only whenever they were together, but also after they separated, as well as someone who wasn't even in a relationship with him.
Whoa.
Not only stalking them at home, but also at their workplace. One lady says that he stalked her so much that she had to quit her job because he was constantly outside. It's different now. If someone was stalking you outside your workplace, you could get someone to take care of that. But back then, people didn't take stalking as seriously as they do now. Even now, it's not always taken very seriously, but back then it really wasn't. So we know that he was stalking at least 2 to 3 women this was the late 80s. And I was thinking, originally we were talking about how was it that he would have known that she had gone out to the store that day. But if he was stalking her, then he would have known what she was doing and where she was. So maybe he was following her. It's definitely a possibility. And he also has taken several people to the site where her body was found, weeks after. And it was almost like he was taking them back and showing it off. Like, this is where they found her body, which is just inappropriate in all ways. You just don't do that.
Yeah.
And why would that be something you would be proud of? I mean, I get a lot of people are rubberneckers, like I'm guilty of that. If you see a car accident or something, we all are.
Yeah.
But if it's something so serious that a friend of yours, if not more, died there, you're bringing people back to that scene.
Yeah, you don't turn it into a tour guide situation.
You don't.
Ever.
Not at all.
You don't even take people to grave sites,
right,
until they're You just don't.
No, you don't do it.
Well, the only thing I can think is like, if you're a stalker, you have obsessive like compulsions to some level, and even if you're dead, he's still like obsessed with her.
Yes.
So like, this is where she was found. You know,
Right.
this is like he's obsessed. Maybe like if it wasn't him,
Right.
he'd still be obsessed with like, well, who was it? Where was she? What happened? And
Yeah, that's true too.
so I mean,
And it's
And-
not to say that all stalkers are killers, or even he is, but it's not a good.
it's not normal.
It's not
no,
a good,
it's definitely not normal.
aside from anything else, it's not a good behavior, and
Not
it's
healthy.
also not uncommon in murderers, right?
Right, for them to start out stalking. He would carry around in his wallet this tiny piece of plastic, that what seemed like plastic wrap to people that just, saw him bring it out. And he would ask people, do you know what this is? And this was people in her family, not just like
Yeah.
random people on the street, but people in her family. And he would say, this is part of Marcie's skin that the killer cut out of her
Excuse
body.
me?
Right.
And the police
And
didn't think that was
right.
Or
And-
you say that to her family?
Yes.
First of all,
I'd punch him.
I know. I definitely.
And then I'd
First-
take it for evidence.
what if it is her skin? That's like
Do they think it was
guilty.
To them, it looked like a pice of plastic, and they thought he was just crazy.
But like, if you think about the gross,
I
but, like if
know.
your skin
Think-
peels off, like
yes,
from a
like
callus
sunburn
or something,
sunburn.
it does look.
like plastic, right?
But how long would he have had? Like, because if you're peeling your sunburn and it is a thin layer of skin, it might look like plastic, but it also is it falls apart like in your
Yeah.
hand.
Well, he says that he picked it up off the ground one of those times when he
Oh,
was
he
making
has
the tour guide.
He has mental issues.
Baloney.
Yes. I don't think
So it
there's
probably wasn't
any
skin.
way.
It was probably just literal piece of plastic, and he's
Right.
just obsessed.
Either
Unless
that
it's
or he.
inside a piece of plastic. Like, what if it's like a tiny
He's for
piece
sure
of
listening to this podcast.
a tiny
Yeah,
piece of
I hope he is. I hope he's terrified.
a tiny piece of skin, like in Saran wrap or something.
Maybe he can talk to us and tell us what.
Yeah,
he-
tell us
was
what it really
going on,
was,
if
where he
there-
really got it.
We love to be correct.
Absolutely. Especially by killers and people that are stalkers. Nothing makes me
You
happier
can
than
find
get
me
those calls.
at 304.
Well, so the way that Courtney was talking in the interview, it seems like they thought maybe someone was hiding in her backseat when they took her, because she
Mhm.
said like her grandma made them check in their cars, like in the back seats before they got in their cars and stuff,
Right.
which would make sense also why her shoes were sitting there and like weren't put back on, because she was
Mhm.
in her car when she got taken.
Right. And that could be a couple of things. One, this guy could have been in her car from when she left the house. If he was in there whenever he left the house, I would think that he would have shown himself prior to her getting out at the grocery store and getting out at the department store. I mean, it's hard to think that he would stay in the car waiting for her that whole time.
Yeah.
Maybe he was. I mean, he could have been waiting to see who she was going to see or where she was going.
Right.
So that's a possibility. Or may have been someone just random that got in the back of the car, one of those places, because people didn't always lock their doors. Everyone just
Right.
assumed everything was so safe back then. No one really locked
Well,
the doors.
And it was manual too. So
Yeah. So
if you're in the oh my gosh, and those 80s cars are huge. So if you're in the driver's seat and that back rear door is unlocked, you're not locking it without getting out of your car.
no, not at all. I'm not anyway.
Mm-mm.
Not a chance. Of course, we heard in the last podcast what relationship we have now with Vigo County.
It seems okay.
Yeah, they've said that they're going to work on things when the time comes. But what we do know about Marcie's case is that she left her mom's home to run errands on August 2nd, 1985, and her family never saw her alive again after that. Her car was found on August 8th at 12th and Eagle, and then her badly decomposed body was found 5 days after that near Rigney and Prairie Town Road over by Honey Creek. And it was kind of off the road too. Like when we talked to her niece, it wasn't on the road. It was like carried off the road. So she was small, but yet as we've talked about in the
Still
past,
takes
a
some
dead
strength.
weight is going
I
to
mean,
take a lot of
right.
strength.
Ronnie struggled with 60 pounds. So no
we
offense.
keep going back there, Ronnie.
No offense, but like 60 pounds is hard enough. And then dead weight, or if she's still alive, fighting.
Yes, you're going to be fighting. So that's a long way. She still had her clothes on except for her socks and shoes, which we know her shoes are still found in her car. And her case has gone unsolved for over 35 years now. But Vigo County Sheriff's Office has assured us that their cold case division will be working on her case at the beginning of the year. If you're listening to the podcast and you killed her, then I hope you know that your time is coming to an end. And I hope that you're as afraid right now as Marcie was when you were killing her. If you're listening to the podcast and you have information on who killed her, then you can contact us at coldcasechronicles@gmail.com or through any of our social media, or you can pass it on to and we can pass it on to Vigo County, or you can contact Vigo County directly at 812-462-3226.
I'm sure there are also some anonymous tip lines around.
Yes, if you can go to the Vigo County website, you can actually put a tip in on the website.
Nice.
They have kind of like a Crime Stoppers where you can enter it online. While we're talking about Vigo County, I wanted to bring up another case that, well, it was actually brought to me before Marcie's case, but I really don't know what we can do with this case other than bring attention to it, because it's just a really difficult situation, and you'll see why. Jerry Cheeseman, he was a homeless man that lived in Terre Haute. He suffered from schizophrenia and drug abuse, had just had a hard time. He had been kicked out of the Lighthouse Mission on Wabash Avenue. And even though he was homeless, he always called home and checked in with his family. And as long as he was on his medication, he was fine. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of people that are homeless, of course, they didn't start out being homeless. And with 2020 the way it is, there's going to be a lot more homeless people out there than there were in 2019. It's going to get much worse. There's also a lot of people that have mental illness that are homeless. Well, when you put them all together, it causes problems.
Right.
People fight and whatnot, and it's just becomes very difficult. So there's a place up on a hill there in Terre Haute where it's almost like a camp where a lot of homeless people go. In the winter, people will bring them blankets and stuff. Even the police will bring blankets up there because they know that there's a lot of homeless people there that are stuck for the winter and there's nothing that can be done. Jerry's last contact with his family was October 17th of 2013. And he had an appointment on October 23rd, and he was a no-show at that appointment. And so that's when they became worried because he hadn't contacted his family. He didn't show up as an appointment.
And that's 10 days from his last contact?
Yes. And so they contacted the police. The police was like, they really didn't know what to do about it. He has no home address. They went out, they, talked to people in that community. But where do you start? What do? You talk to people, but there's really no line of communication other than with his family. And that was cut off. It's not like he's out with the debit card spending money. It really becomes more difficult whenever you're dealing with a homeless population and someone that's missing. There has been a rumor mill that has leaked back into the family saying that he was murdered. If he was, then who did it? How did they do it? Where's his body? No one's going to know until that he's murdered until you see his body. His family's going to continue to hold out hope. And if someone knows that he's murdered, then let us know where his body is so they can bring him home. While we're on that subject, why do some cases get more publicity than others. This family has tried to get their brother and their relatives' name out there so much so people could be looking for him out on the street or someone could know about him. It's like, oh, he suffers from schizophrenia or drug abuse, or he's homeless, so he isn't anyone important, versus someone like Lori Vallow's kids who the whole entire world was looking for, which I get it, they were kids, but we've done cases before where there were kids and they weren't really looked for. What changes the game there? Is it because Lori Vallow's kids were that it was like a cult situation, or they have money, or what makes a difference? Is it
there's still such a stigma on mental illness, right?
Absolutely.
So, like, how do they explain? And then how do you explain that? Like,
well, immediately people want to believe, well, he had mental illness. He's probably like ran off somewhere. And
right.
Then, or if that one doesn't work for them, they'll say he was homeless. And then people truly separate their like okayness with death with home. Like if you're homeless, and it's so sad because it's literally money. Like you're putting money, like since you are homeless and don't have money, it's not a, like they
right.
brush it off.
It's like they're like, oh, that's a throwaway.
Yeah,
because he didn't matter, but he did matter.
But the biggest thing is publicity. I mean, people don't talk about these because the press don't cover it well because they don't know and they suspect they're going to find him addicted to something or ran off.
Who does the press get their information from? The police who are investigating, and if the police don't investigate because they can say, well, he maybe fell off his meds and we'll never find him, or he's homeless, he can do whatever he wants, or he's an adult, he just doesn't
and that's what they say, well, we don't know that he's missing. Right. We can't prove he's
okay. Well,
missing.
Can you find him?
Right.
I mean, if you can't find him, he's missing.
He's missing.
Yeah. And then cities all over the world like spend more money making life more difficult for homeless people than they do for helping them. Like putting like partitions in park benches so you can't sleep there.
And I get it that you don't want your city and inner city full of people that are begging and these type of things. It makes your city look bad. I've been to Chicago where I was absolutely terrified by some people coming up to me in an alley and would not let me get into the door of my hotel because he had his child there saying, I need you to give me money for my kid. And I was like freaking out because I didn't have any cash. Like all I had, I never carry cash. Yeah. It is a problem for certain cities. Have a solution. Put in more shelters. Do more for this population. Don't just shut them out. That's not a solution to the problem. It's a solution to people who don't want to see it and just push it out. But the solution is not just pushing it out. The solution is fixing the problem. Help them get jobs. Help them be rehabilitated if that's what's going on, if it's drug abuse or whatever it is. You've got to fix the problem. You can't just put a Band-Aid on it and think it's going to go away because it's not.
And he's homeless. How far can he get? He's on foot, most likely, right?
Yeah.
So get out there and find him.
Find him, right. What drew my attention to this is something that happened just a couple of months after he went missing. There was a guy who was in a boat out in the Wabash River in Terre Haute, and he came across the body of a man that was 51 years old, and his body was found in the river. His head was severed from the neck up. The right side of his chest had 2 puncture wounds, and there was a large cut down the left side of his abdomen. So basically, he was beheaded and gutted, and he was naked. They took several days to even figure out who he was because of all the damage to his body. And they were finally able to get fingerprints from him, and they realized who he was, and he was Michael Richard Pollock, and he was homeless. And so that was the first thing that caught my attention. And he was murdered by 54-year-old Jay Millen, who was also homeless. And so I thought, well, that makes sense that if they're fighting, if they have issues, what if this guy also killed Jerry? I mean, it just seems like that's a big deal to behead someone and gut them. Like, that's not going to be your first rodeo.
Psychopath behavior.
You know?
That's not just an we were fighting and I killed you.
Right. And according to the Indy Star, it says that he told a witness that a couple of times he went over and kicked the body after he killed him. He went over and kicked the body out of frustration about the situation. He said that he then undressed his body and pulled it down to the river's edge, used a hatchet to cut him open and remove his intestines, and then cut off his head with the same hatchet. This is a guy that is sick. 2014. This is a guy that is sick, and I can tell you that he's probably done something like this before. And it occurred because he said that they got into an argument because he wanted his, basically like kind of like his EBT card or something, you know? And so he got mad about it, and he took a rock and bashed his head in, and then everything else came after that. Like, he got mad, went and kicked his body, and then decided to...
Yeah, so heat of the moment rage killing is one thing, but then abusing a corpse is not, and a psychopath behavior.
Right.
Yeah,
like that's one of those, like a passion killing is a passion killing, and that, I don't excuse it by any means, but yeah, and it's fucking batshit
gross.
Crazy.
Yeah. And I just feel like if he would do this to this guy just several months after Jerry goes missing, it's a very, and they lived in the same camp area. And so it's like, it's a very big coincidence, I would think. Now? He's in prison.
Pen pal.
Yes, a new pen pal. Like, I need a new prison pen pal.
How is David?
Speaking of my prison pen pals, he's great. Like, I don't know if this is connected or not, but it seems very suspicious.
I don't have enough money for food, so I need your EBT card, but
I'm going to bash your head in with the
I have a hatchet, and I'm going to cut your head off. No.
And it seems to me that people graduate to those kind of things.
Right. And maybe he didn't like use a hatchet on Jerry, but
he may have found that kind of rage against him. Who knows? I think it should be looked into if it wasn't already. And now we know that there are some people that are just pieces of shit and go around and they kill homeless people. I've seen it in different towns where they're just like easy target. People aren't going to miss them. That's their attitude about it. You know,
it's the same as sex workers.
Right.
You know, the murder podcast,
Murder
Squad. They covered an episode about like a today serial killer probably killing sex workers in like Ohio, like all these women, and they always make it look like it's like a drug thing, and people just they drug, but it's like they're naked and like mutilated, and stuff like that. And then Karen from MFM I just listened to it from a few months ago, covered the case out in like Washington where people, you know how people would jump on trains and stuff. Well, they kept finding like dead bodies, and someone was killing like the homeless people on the trains, and people just kept not looking into it. And it's like, there's a serial killer killing people, and you guys think, well, you know, they're homeless, so it's okay. But like, one, they matter too.
Yes.
And two, who's to say that person's not going to go out to next is like your kid on accident? Like, they don't get to decide that.
Right. And besides that, this is someone's kid, you know, and they need to think about that. You know, everyone is just a couple of paychecks away from being homeless.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't start out in their life when they graduated high school, or even if they didn't graduate high school, thinking, I want to be homeless. My dream is to suffer from schizophrenia, get into drugs, and be homeless. That's not anyone's dream.
Right.
You know?
But then, you know, in the early 90s when the government stopped paying for places like, understandably, like no jurisdiction covering, like making sure there's like not rampant abuse, but like Central State, where they are getting mental health care. They like, obviously, but they defunded it. They closed every facility around the nation and said, good luck.
With this type of thing, even if they offer them medication, they have places like Lighthouse Mission. They can handle a certain amount of people. But if you put even 30 to 50 people together that have drug abuse issues and mental illness, what do you expect? I worked in a mental health facility that was a day treatment facility that had anywhere between 15 and 30 patients with all schizophrenia. And it was rough, and they were medicated. I would not want to even think about putting together that many people who also had drug abuse issues, because these are people that every day we had self-care and we knew they weren't abusing drugs.
Yeah.
This was just all people who suffered from schizophrenia. It was a lot. This was just a day treatment. I didn't have to deal with the nighttime treatment and all of this and deal with it all day, where people at Lighthouse Mission are dealing with the meals and the sleeping arrangements, and you're putting people together side by side on cot.
Yep.
And expecting them to live their life together. I mean, I've lived with my husband over 20 years, and sometimes I want to kill him when he's snoring. And
Oh, is it only when he's snoring?
Yeah. Well, not really. But you put all these people together and they're having withdrawal symptoms and all the,
Right.
there's just a lot going on. So it's a lot to deal with, and they're not getting the help that they need.
There's still so much stigma.
Yes, they need to be getting one-on-one therapy. They need to be getting one-on-one drug abuse counseling, just a lot of things that they're not able financially to give to them.
They're legitimate medical conditions. It's not just like anyone just was like, you know what, I'm going to go get addicted to drugs today.
Right,
All it takes is one injury.
right.
One injury. And that's how most of it starts.
And then you can't get pain pills anymore, and then you get on heroin, and then it's over.
And then you sell
That's
your
it.
house to buy heroin.
Yes,
And then you're
and
homeless.
then you're done. And then you're done.
It's a quick downfall.
It is. It's a huge downfall. Or it's teenage kids. I'll just try it one time because everybody's doing it, and that's it. Rich people, poor people, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and you might not see it yet, but I bet there's someone in your family.
Oh, for sure. There's people in my family. There's people in every family that has drug addiction problems.
Definitely.
For sure. So with Jerry's case, if anyone knows anything about him, he would always wear light color khaki pants, and he normally would wear 2 jackets, one on top of the other, just so that he would keep up with them. But one of his jackets was found in the woods by some of his family. Yes. So that's not a very good
Was
sign.
it like buried?
No, just found in the woods. So that's not a good sign because he didn't have it on, but yet he could have taken it off on his own free will. No one knows. His hair was brown. His eyes were brown. He was around 5'6" and 140 pounds. And if anyone has any information about what happened to him, you can contact us and we can pass the information along to Terre Haute Police if you don't want to call the police, or you can call Terre Haute Police Department at 812-238-1661 or Crime Stoppers at 812-238-STOP.
Were those woods near the river?
Everything in Terre Haute is within walking
Yes.
distance of the river.
That's true. That's true.
We
need a boat. That's exactly what I said. If I could get my hands on a boat, I guarantee you we'd find more bodies in the Wabash.
If you need to donate a boat,
yes,
let us know.
I bet we could find one. I mean, we don't need anything nice.
No, I just need one that runs well enough to put
I'll
sonar
row.
equipment. No, you're not rowing.
No, we're not.
No, we're not.
We need it a little bit nicer than
Yes.
that. Even if it's an outboard, like
Yeah, it's got to be able to support sonar equipment, and yeah, no rowboats, please.
Next week, another cold case. As we move forward, we never forget the cases we have covered and will continue to research. An update episode will be coming soon. If you like what you've heard, please like and share on social media. Cold Case Chronicles on Facebook and Instagram, or at Cold Case Crew on Twitter. And as always,
Have the day you deserve.
Especially if you killed Marcie Fuller Swinford or you know the whereabouts of Jerry Cheeseman.
I know your secrets and I'm telling on you.